The first televised presidential debate occurred on this date 56 years ago in 1960, when Vice President Richard Nixon faced off with John F. Kennedy. History will be made once again tonight as the presidential nominees square off in their first debate. We want to discuss the memorable debate moments with presidential historian Doug Wead. Doug, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Maria.
First, give us your sense of what you're expecting tonight.
Well, big audience, big crowd. I think we need to be warned that usually it's in hindsight that we see these great moments we're going to be talking about. When they're happening, they just kind of blend in. You're not sure, was that a moment or not a moment? Right. So it's a little more subtle
so
when it happens.
When you look back for us, Richard Nixon versus John F. Kennedy, for example. Many say that Nixon lost the election because of his appearance. What lesson did the candidates learn from this one?
That you got to look good. It's not only you got to be logical, you got to look good. And these debates are watershed moments in our culture. There are people who are dying today of skin cancer because they decided Kennedy had a healthy tan. He actually had Addison's disease, but it looked good. And so people begin to worship the sun, and you had to look good in business, dress for success. There were socio-cultural impact of this debate as well as presidential politics.
So is there a takeaway that it's not necessarily what the candidates say and do, it's how they look and how they come across? So is part of their mannerisms, temperament, is that a huge influence, historically speaking?
Well, it's both. It's both, Kevin, and it's definitely the lesson learned is you got to look good, too. But you do have to be as logical as you can be.
Doug, what is considered to be the biggest screw-up in presidential debate history? What stands out above and beyond? Because I've watched most of them, and I remember Gerald Ford debating whether there were certain countries, I think Poland, one of them, was part of the Soviet bloc. But what's the biggest one in your mind?
I think that one might be, and it's very ironic and it's sad. I had many interviews with Gerald Ford, and I talked to him about this. He was speaking to the Soviets. He met with Leonid Brezhnev in 1974, and he wanted to say to the Soviets and make it clear in that 1976 debate, we do not recognize your domination of Eastern Europe. Instead, he came off like a little schoolboy who hadn't gotten to the Yalta lesson yet in history, and it wasn't accurate. The moral of the story is know your audience, and for Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, the Russians aren't the audience, their donors aren't the audience, the media is not their audience. Their audience are the 3 million undecided voters in 7 toss-up states.
Right.
And they have to keep that in mind.
And that's the thing. I mean, you've got this, group of people that are totally loyal to Hillary, and another group that's totally loyal to Donald, and then you've got this huge swath of people that are independents. So we have that soundbite. We want to play it. President Reagan used levity to tackle concerns about his age when debating Walter Mondale in 1984. Let's listen to this.
Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
That was so clever. So how important is it for these nominees to show their personality during a debate? He got a laugh.
Well, it's important, but the lesson learned from that moment for me is the fastball, the expected question, and that was an expected question. You can hit those for a home run. If you know it's coming, that's not what'll strike you out. It's the changeup. For a major leaguer, it's the changeup pitch you got to hit. That's the softball, like in 1988 when Michael Dukakis gave an academic answer to a personal question. And you'll remember Ted Kennedy was taken out of the presidency. He was going to answer questions in Chappaquiddick. He was going to run for president November 1979. He chose CBS, and he chose Roger Mudd. And Roger Mudd delivered this underhanded little softball question and said, "Why do you want to be president?" And Kennedy swung and missed. And it ruined his presidential career. So watch tonight for some of the softball questions for them to be a little unprepared and caught off guard.
Well, and it was also Mondale's reaction to President Reagan that hurt
What could he do?
Mondale because again he's like over there laughing. I mean, it's a legitimate response, but it made Ronald Reagan seem that much more likable, and I think it was the response that hurt him as much as the line from Reagan.
That's true, Dagan. But what could he do?
Yeah. Look like a sourpuss. I mean, that's what you have to rehearse. It's like if they say something clever and funny, don't look like you like them in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. A lot of people are expecting this to be a really dirty debate, right? That they're going to really attack each other. What lessons can we learn from the past about dirty debating?
Oh, well, negative politics works, but it doesn't work well for the candidate themselves. They can come off as harsh. And there is that moment with Gore and Bush that I find very comical. Gore had picked up the idea that he was hot-headed, George W., and so he invaded his space, and Bush just looked disdainfully and nodded, and Gore wilted away. Gore came off like, he looked like, okay.
We've got that one. It was Al Gore invading George W. Bush's personal space during the debate. This was back in 2000. Watch this.
That I can get something positive done on behalf of the people. That's what the question in this campaign is about. It's not only what's your philosophy and what's your position on issues, but can you get things done? And I believe I can.
Yeah, I think that Gore comes off looking like the science nerd who's poking a fight that he knows he's not going to win.
Yeah.
I called George W. Bush in 1998 on the telephone, and I said, Governor, they lampooned you last night on Saturday Night Live, and it was awful. They made you look really, really dumb. And there was a long pause. I actually thought he was no longer on the line, and then he said, good. So the lesson learned from this encounter with Gore and Bush is never underestimate your opponent. There's a reason why they're on the stage with you. Don't believe your own propaganda about them. You're in a tough debate with a very talented person.
Really quickly, though, they did not underestimate Gore. They started prepping for that first debate in 2000 in April of that year.
Wow.
In secret. Started up in Kennebunkport, and Senator Judd Gregg played Al Gore, and because he had served in the House with him, he said, I knew him really well, and he was very arrogant.
Wow.
And they worked it.
Well, what was he trying to do by getting in
his
his personal space? What was he trying to do?
He wanted a reaction.
He
wanted a reaction.
So, and that was what he was intending to do. Let me get up and intimidate, stand next to him. Wow, amazing. Doug, thank you. Really great stuff.
Thank you very much.
Doug Wead joining us there. We will